So today's topic is leaky gut. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with leaky gut, and some of you have been told by your doctor that there is nothing like that that exists unless you've gone to a functional medicine consultant or a naturopath who is aware of this. So basically, how this will go today is I'm going to talk for some time, and I have a set of PowerPoint slides to show. If you've heard me speak before, you know that I cannot do without PowerPoint slides. And then you'll get to ask questions at the end of it. So let me start sharing my screen. Okay. So before I go on to what is leaky gut and why is it important to know whether you have leaky gut and what it means for you, I'm just going to briefly explain the differences between, as a functional medicine consultant, how do I or people like me look at health versus what we did in traditional medicine. So I was an OBGY before, and many years ago, actually, I gave up being a conventional OBGY. I completed a fellowship in functional and metabolic medicine from the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And this is what I do now. So I live in Alberta in Canada, and I'm originally from India. Because of the pandemic, of course, back in the days I used to say I live in two countries. Now I can't claim that because I haven't been to India for a while. And what I am excited about is, functional medicine is what it makes so much of a difference in people's lives. So I was an OBGY. Of course, it was wonderful conducting deliveries, doing surgeries and things like that, and people were happy when they had a baby and everything, mother and child are healthy and wonderful. But since I moved into functional medicine, I somehow feel that I am able to make a much bigger difference in the lives of people now than before. So going back to what Western medicine does is, and again, we look at the body as different organ systems. Now, obviously, that is an artificial construct because, Mother Nature did not make our body to be, the brain is independent of the heart or the gut is independent of everything else. But that was an artificial construct because, number one, it is impossible for a doctor to be a specialist in everything. So we needed specialists. But along the journey, we somehow forgot, I think, that everything is connected to everything else. So there was a joke years ago where a surgeon was saying, "Oh, 1 inch, and I would have gone into the gynecologist's territory." So it's a joke, yes, but the fact is your body is actually connected to everything else. So bottom line is, for example, what is happening in the gut would definitely have an impact on what is going on in your brain or your heart, or and chronic inflammation is something that would connect all of them together. So in a functional medicine approach, and most of you have seen this, what I call my constellation. So basically your health is decided by so many different factors, and as time goes, I think we'll probably have even more and more. So chronic inflammation, I mentioned before. So having high levels of inflammation in your body is related to about 95% of chronic health challenges. Whether you're looking at mood issues, whether you're looking at digestive issues, whether you're looking at a higher risk for heart disease, stroke, dementia, you name it, it's there. Autoimmunity is also a condition of chronic inflammation. Then your circadian rhythm, or your body's biological clock, what time you eat food and when do you get sunlight exposure on your eyes, those will decide how your body's metabolism starts functioning. So a lot of new research has come out a few years ago. In fact, the Nobel Prize was awarded for this. So the body's biological clock has a huge impact on how you function. So if you are someone who does not prioritize sleep and you go to bed like at 2 a.m. because you think it's only lazy people who sleep early, then that can impact your metabolism to the point where you end up storing fat rather than using it up. So there's so many different ways. And if you go for your lab tests, you realize that you're usually asked to go in the morning on an empty stomach if you have to test something like thyroid. So hormones also have a circadian rhythm. your how your immune system functions, that has a biological rhythm. So everything is, related to everything else. Environmental toxins, again, a big one, and very important when I'm going to talk about leaky gut today. Exercise, movement, food. In my world of functional medicine, food is like major, because unless we fix food, or get you to eat food that are right for you, and I've talked about food in the very first webinar in February. So food is primary. If food is not, taken care of, it's like there are no magic supplements that you can keep adding and, expecting different results. So food is primary. Genes and epigenetics. Your genes do not decide your destiny. So, for example, what do I mean by that? So let us say you have a family history of diabetes or dementia. Now, that does not have to be your destiny, because your lifestyle, what you do, what you eat, how you sleep, how you move, all these things, and your social connections, these will decide your health. It doesn't have to be, it will not be decided by only your genes, because your genes have to be expressed. So that is what is epigenetics, above the gene. So my point is, if you have a family history of, heart disease, stroke, diabetes, dementia, that is not going to be your destiny. You can change that. Then, of course, gut, immune, brain, which is so important. And one of the aspects of that is what I'm going to talk about today. Hormones impact every cell in your body, and there are so many different hormones. So the common ones are, when we say hormones, usually a lot of women think it's only estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And in fact, estrogen is the one that gets a lot of prominence. But we have a whole bunch of other hormones as well. For example, we have insulin, we have cortisol. Then there are hormones like the thyroid hormones, parathyroid hormones, a whole bunch of hormones are there. Then the gut itself has a whole bunch of hormones which are unique to the gut. Then your medications can impact leaky gut. Then metabolic dysfunction, I've already mentioned. Stress response. Stress is huge, and particularly now with the ongoing pandemic, stress has a huge impact on every area of your health, and leaky gut is one of those main areas. Then briefly, I will talk about a little bit about supplementation, particularly in relation to leaky gut, because I'm talking about leaky gut today. So basically, what is leaky gut? Now you will notice that, I've put it in quotes, because leaky gut is a term which is not really used by medical science, because they like the more longer and more clever sounding term called intestinal permeability or gut barrier dysfunction. But essentially it means the same thing. So leaky gut is and many of you have probably come across, on the internet, someone saying, oh, you probably have leaky gut syndrome. So I'm going to briefly explain whether there really is a syndrome versus, what is leaky gut. So again, I'm sorry, I apologize for this very complex looking, image. I have to get a better one, better one made. So these cells in these in these things in yellow, these are the single layer of cells in your gut. Now, interestingly, your gut has a single layer of cells. Your endothelium, that is the lining of your blood vessels. So the blood vessels supplying your brain, your heart, and every organ in the body, those have a single layer as well. Then I'm sure you've heard of the term the blood-brain barrier. So that is also a single layer thick. So the blood-brain barrier would prevent harmful stuff from going into the brain. So all these are, a single layer thick, and because they are just a single layer thick, what happens is they are more prone to getting damaged easily. And these black stuff you can see connecting the two cells, these are basically what are called tight junctions. Now, just because the term tight junctions does not mean that, these are like a brick wall. They are very dynamic structures, because our bodies do need to allow some things to go in and some things should not go in. So what happens in, intestinal permeability or leaky gut, these tight junctions don't function the way they should. So their function is not optimal. And in such situations, what happens? So what basically happens is one of the most important function of this barrier is to prevent things that should not be coming in contact with your immune system. Now you can see that the immune system is here, and because of the ongoing pandemic, everyone has become even more familiar with the immune system now. So here is your immune system, and here are the cells of the gut. And if these junctions don't function well, what ends up happening is stuff that should have gone down the gut without raising an immune response. Once the immune system comes in contact with them because of the malfunctioning tight junctions, the immune system is under constant surveillance. So it's always looking out for what is going on, and we are fortunate that our immune system is on constant surveillance, because that is how we build immune resilience. So the immune system is always looking for, okay, this is something I can see coming down the gut. Is this something that is foreign, or is it a part of my body? If it is foreign, is it dangerous? Is it not dangerous? So, what happens is when there are too many things coming in contact with the immune system which shouldn't have been coming in contact with it because of the leaky gut, the immune system may sometimes mount an irresponsible response, in the sense that one of the things is something like, for example, gluten. Now, gluten for someone with celiac disease is like really serious. However, there is also a condition called non celiac gluten sensitivity. So, the difference between the two is celiac disease, you need to have the genes for celiac disease. It's an autoimmune condition. So, basically, your immune system looks at gluten and says, okay, this is something that is foreign and it's also harmful. So, I need to mount an immune response, and in that mounting that immune response, a lot of other normal tissue gets destroyed as well. So in celiac disease, it's the gut. If it is hypothyroidism, Hashimoto's, it is your thyroid tissue that gets destroyed. So in different autoimmune conditions, different organs get destroyed, different tissue gets destroyed. In multiple sclerosis, it would be your nerve cells. So basically, why would leaky gut happen? Now, as you can see from all these things at the top: stress, environmental toxins like gluten, pharmaceutical medications, drugs, bacteria, viruses, gut dysbiosis. That means having, the kind of bacteria which are not really helping you in your gut. Gut dysbiosis, head injury, traumatic brain injury can make it such that your gut barrier is not functioning the way it should. So many different conditions, and what can happen. So this is something that you don't want happening. And one of my areas of focus is autoimmune conditions. So for you to develop any autoimmune condition, few things have to be in place. Number one is you need to have the genes. So that is the reason, if it is Hashimoto's, it's very likely you have the thyroid genes which are causing the problem. If it is celiac disease, then you have the celiac disease genes. The next is, of course, an immune system imbalance. The third thing is a trigger. So, like I said, last month was on thyroid. So, thyroid, it could be a viral infection. In celiac disease, it is gluten. In a lot of other conditions can be triggered by a viral infection. Some conditions can be triggered by a medication as well. So many different, like for example, taking excessive amounts of iodine can trigger an inflammation of the thyroid gland. So many different triggers may be there. Sometimes we don't know the specific trigger for a condition, other than, like, for celiac disease, we know the trigger is gluten. But for thyroid, we don't always know. Yes, commonly it is sometimes a urinary infection, or it could be a viral infection, but it is not as specific, or it could be a food toxin, it could be some enzymes or preservatives in food. So the three things: number one is genes, immune system problem, a trigger, and the fourth thing that has to be present for you to develop an autoimmune condition is leaky gut. So gut barrier dysfunction. And again, you see, you have the genes from before you were born, but most people are not, they're not born with an autoimmune condition at birth, but it can happen later on. So the trigger and the leaky gut are the things that can come in later. So basically, that is why gut barrier dysfunction is so important, not just for autoimmunity. And in the next few slides, you'll see how many different conditions there are. So if you can't read this slide, I'm sorry, I'm just going to read out of them these. So you can see, and every time I've had to increase, the number of tiles on this slide. So cirrhosis, spondylosis, asthma, autism, fibromyalgia, HIV, AIDS, painkillers, stress, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, Parkinson's, irritable bowel syndrome. So you can see that there are a huge variety of conditions which have been associated with leaky gut. And why I am showing this slide is, if you have any of these conditions, the chances are very high that you have leaky gut. But a lot of you come and tell me, I think I have leaky gut syndrome. So in medicine, we don't really say that you have a leaky gut syndrome, because syndrome means it's only a specific condition versus, leaky gut may be present across many different conditions. Next question comes, how will you know if you have leaky gut? So, are there some specific symptoms associated with leaky gut? Some of you have told me, I have bloating, I have diarrhea, I have stomach pain, I have foggy thinking, I have, my body aches and pains. I'm sure I have leaky gut. But the fact is, these symptoms are not specific to just leaky gut. Even gut dysbiosis can cause these kind of symptoms. Or it could be that you have, nutritional depletion, or your body could be mounting an auto response to something, that some food sensitivity. Even then you would have, similar symptoms. So in the medical world, we don't talk about, symptoms specific to leaky gut, but there are common symptoms, occurring across all these conditions. For example, somebody could be having IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And one type of IBS is also autoimmune. So if you've had an infection, post-infection IBS can be an autoimmune condition. But again, what are the symptoms? Again, someone may have pain, or pain after eating certain kind of food, or gassy feeling, or bloating, and headaches, or it could be brain fog, and a whole lot of things. So the bottom line is, it's not specific to leaky gut, it's a whole lot of different conditions which can have common symptoms. So this was one of the most important things that I wanted to bring up, because sometimes you read stuff on the internet, and then it's someone selling some supplements, who's trying to convince you that if you have these things, then you have leaky gut syndrome, and just take my magic supplements and you're going to be fine. So that is something I would like to encourage you to think differently. No magic supplements, or probiotics, high dose, none of those things alone will help you. What will help you, and I'm sure most of you know what I'm going to talk about, is going to be how you heal your gut. So, gut healing, and gut healing, as I've spoken so many times before, always starts with doing an elimination diet. And very soon I'm going to talk about what are the other things that we need to do when we're talking about the gut. The next question comes, how will you know if you have leaky gut? Are there specific tests that you would do? So there, basically, normally I don't usually test for leaky gut. There is a test called the zonulin test, which is available in some parts of the world. It's not available everywhere. Then there are some other tests you may have read about, the lactulose mannitol test. Most of the time, I don't do the test, because my goal is to get you feeling better first. But some of you want to know, like you really need to know whether you have leaky gut, and only then will you go to the next step. So yes, sometimes for some of you, we may recommend the testing, but I am not someone who discusses or who recommends a lot of testing at the very beginning. So how will you know? Number one is, if you have an autoimmune condition, very likely you have leaky gut. Or if you have any of these gut related symptoms, or if you have one of those conditions I talked about. Now, who doesn't have stress? If you had, let us say, some kind of head trauma, then it is very highly likely that you would have leaky gut. But irrespective of what the cause of your leaky gut is, our treatment is kind of the same for everyone. And that sometimes people tell me, you talk about personalized medicine, how are you personalizing it? It's like the same elimination diet you talk about for everyone, but some things are kind of basic. So unless the basic is dialed in, it is very difficult to, for you to manage everything else. So when we talk about, gut healing, or if you want to say that, talk about healing leaky gut, what are the things we talk about? And if you've heard me speak before, you've heard me talk about the 5R program of gut healing. First and foremost, remove. And in the February webinar, I talked about what are the things we are removing. So, food sensitivities, and to remove food sensitivities, what do you need to do? Ideally, the best way to do that is to do a food elimination diet. And some of you want, again, I said you want to get tested. So there are tests available, but not in every country in the world. So yes, you could test, but it is easier to do an elimination diet, though it's a little more irksome. It's like, okay, you have to stop eating a bunch of food, and then you reintroduce, and then you sit and track your symptoms, and then that is how you figure out whether you have a food sensitivity. Then there could be things like parasites or yeast infection in the gut. So, first and foremost, we need to figure out what your food sensitivities are. After that, slowly, if you are not feeling better, if your symptoms have not been resolved to the way that you find satisfactory, then we need to look at, parasites, yeast infection, or a whole bunch of other stuff. After remove comes replace. So sometimes you may be having low hydrochloric acid, so low stomach acid. Now the stomach has acid for a reason, because that acid takes care of a lot of the infections and things like that that come down the gut when you're eating. So what happens is sometimes many of you have been, prescribed a proton pump inhibitor. So that's like omeprazole, lansoprazole, any of those medications, because you have some, reflux, and you are told that you probably have extra acid. Now, sometimes what happens is you may be actually having low stomach acid. And again, there are ways to find out. Easiest to do is a betaine test. And in case you want to know how to do a betaine test, just send me an email and I'll send you the handout. So that is betaine. Next is, you may not find betaine everywhere in the world. So you have to find the betaine supplement. Then comes digestive enzymes. So you may not have adequate enzymes to digest. And again, some of the things are fairly easy for you to find out. Bile acids is the other one that may need replacement, particularly if you've already had a gallbladder removal surgery. You may need some bile acids. Now, digestive enzymes, truthfully, you cannot really test for digestive enzymes. So the best way is to, if you're not digesting well, one of the things you can try is, if you're not digesting protein well, and if you don't have adequate hydrochloric acid in the stomach, you won't digest protein well. You can try having apple cider vinegar with your protein containing food. So that is one way. And apple cider vinegar also reduces levels of insulin. So figure out if that works for you, then you sort of solved your problem. Digestive enzymes, again, you can try a bunch of, digestive enzymes that are available as supplements, high quality supplements, and see if they are helping. So there is no one single test which is going to tell you whether you have a deficiency or a problem with digestive enzymes. Then comes repopulate. So, what do we repopulate with? Probiotics, prebiotics, and fermented food. So, probiotics are supplements which contain whole bunch of healthy bacteria, and probiotics have to be at a certain concentration. So, usually the concentration is described in colony forming units. So, usually we say that 30 billion, billion with a B, 30 billion colony forming unit is sort of like the count for, a basic probiotic. But again, it should contain a variety of bacteria in it. So if it's a probiotic with just one bacteria, that may not be enough for you. And probiotics, quite often we can give while we are getting you through an elimination diet. Now, what are prebiotics? Prebiotics are basically, things like inulin, which are actually food for your gut bacteria. But the best food for your gut bacteria are the food that you eat. So vegetable fibers, those are very good prebiotics. Then comes, fermented food like, sauerkraut and, kimchi, all these things. And again, what kind of fermented food will work best for you? Some of it depends, of course, on your ethnicity. So if you are from an ethnicity who are used to having sauerkraut or kimchi or any of these, then that might work better for you versus somebody else. So again, different things for you to try out. And are those the only things? Now, some of you have had great experiences with just adding a fermented food, versus many of you needed, a very high dose probiotic. You needed, very restrictive elimination diet. So different things for different people. So again, for leaky gut, what is the other thing we would look at is repairing the gut lining and providing nutrients. So some of these nutrients are, many of you are deficient in them. Some you can find out from doing a routine blood test, like zinc, you can find out, vitamin A, vitamin D, you can find out, not so much with vitamin C, unless you're doing some specialized testing. Omega 3s is a big one. Now, omega 3s you can actually test. So it's a dry blood test. We just send the sample to the US. And omega 3s are essential fatty acids. That means your body is not making them. So obviously, you need to get them either from food or from supplements. And most of the time, you would need both food and supplements. Food alone will not give you enough. Again, the levels will depend on how much of omega 3 you have in your in your blood. And if you're interested in getting the test done, if you're in the US or Canada, I can have a kit shipped to you. In India, it's a little more difficult. If someone's traveling there, then you can send. Then antioxidants like, all these EGCG, curcumin, berberine, you can add a whole bunch of stuff depending on what other actions you need. For example, if you have high inflammation levels, let us say your CRP is high. HSCRP is a blood test you can do, and you also have gut issues. So, in someone like that, I would probably say, okay, you can start adding a curcumin supplement. So, curcumin will help in reducing the inflammation in other areas as well. Then something like, EGCG, green tea extract. There are so many different, antioxidants available. Then amino acids like L-glutamine. Many people have benefited so much with that L-glutamine that they love to continue taking it. So again, this is like, should you take L-glutamine before doing an elimination diet? If you ask me, I would say no, that may not be the best idea, because some of you think that if you could just add one more supplement, things are going to be different. But my going by my experience and knowledge, I always like to encourage you to manage your food first, because that is going to give you long term results. And your food has so many different actions in your body. Your food is signals to your gut microbiome. Food is signals to your genes. So food as medicine is what I look at. So obviously, I would love you to fix your food first and then add supplements. But again, there are no hard and fast rules. Like if you do the elimination diet for, let us say, 6 weeks, can you add a glutamine soon after that? Yes, sometimes you can. And should you add a probiotic while you're doing the elimination diet? Yes. Then comes the, out of the 5 hour program, next is rebalance. So, how do you rebalance? Sleep, exercise, stress management. So, all these different things you can use to deal with your leaky gut. And again, like I said, there is no one magic supplement that's going to do everything. So that was my last slide. I'll stop sharing. And before I take questions, one thing I wanted to say is, what would be some of my favorite supplements to go for if I was to look at leaky gut? One of the first ones would be a high quality probiotic, but this is at the same time when you've done your elimination diet. Vitamin D, and vitamin D has so many different functions, the immune system being one of the big ones. Vitamin D deficiency is very common, and you cannot get enough vitamin D from being in the sun, and because there's so many other factors which impact it. So number one is your skin color. Someone of my skin color is not going to get any vitamin D. Next is, where in the world do you live? If you are in the northern latitudes versus nearer to the equator, you'll make more vitamin D in the equator versus northern latitudes. Then the third thing is, how much of your body are you exposing? I mean, I come from India, and in India, we don't usually expose a lot of our body. Maybe one of the reasons was because it's so hot. We didn't want to get burnt. So obviously, we cannot expect, just by exposing my face at 8 o'clock in the morning to the sun, I'm going to get all the vitamin D. But at the same time, exposing your eyes to daylight is very important, not from the point of view of making vitamin D, but from the view of your circadian clock. So that is what I talked about at the beginning, first, my constellation slide. So daylight triggers the clock in the brain, which tells all the other clocks in the body that you had better start functioning. So that is the reason daylight exposure is very important. Daylight exposure is important, number one, for your mood, number two, for sleep. And again, the two are interrelated. If you don't sleep well, your mood the next day can get affected very badly. So that is one of the primary reasons, that if you don't get good sleep, the next day is kind of, it's a problem. One is, the most important thing is how your mood gets affected. So you need daylight exposure, not necessarily for vitamin D. And some of my friends here in Calgary, so they actually downloaded an app which was actually tracking how much sunlight they were getting, and it kind of gave like estimate of how much vitamin D you probably have. And there was, like, even in the nice, wonderful, Calgary summer, they never had enough vitamin D from sun exposure only. So yes, it is important. Daylight exposure is important from the point of view of your circadian clock, mood, sleep issues, not so much vitamin D. So for vitamin D, you'd need a supplement. How much you need to supplement will depend on your blood levels. So those are so number one was probiotics. Next one is vitamin D. My third favorite, supplement, and this is not just for leaky gut, for anyone. The third favorite of mine is omega-3 fatty acids. So those are again very important. How much omega-3 should you take? Again, ideally, we would like to test for your, omega-3 levels. Like I keep saying, why guess when you can test? And sometimes you may be surprised. So we've had a lot of our patients, when once we started doing the test, it's like, I've been taking an omega-3 supplement, but how come my levels are still not where they should be? So that is when, maybe you need to up the, supplement intake. And omega-3 capsules are kind of big, so many times some people say, oh, I don't want to take such big capsules, two or three of them. But once they see the reports, then it's a different story. And of course, you need to combine, eating fish with that, because the other thing with fish is you also get proteins, and proteins are extremely important. So these are my top three favorites. Then depending on what else is, if you have any more nutrient deficiencies, for example, zinc we can always measure. Zinc is very important for the immune system, and of course for healing a leaky gut it would be very important. So many different things. Then of course, when do you add a betaine or apple cider vinegar or digestive enzymes or bile acids? It would depend on what your symptoms are, how you're doing, and what many of you are not open to taking a whole bunch of supplements, and I don't actually support that you take 30 supplements and that becomes your food. So fix the food first, then number one, you're going to need a whole lot less supplements as well. So that's all from me today, and please feel free to type your questions in the chat box, and and you will receive a recording of this. I don't see any questions yet. You can either type in the chat box or in the Q&A. Okay, so far no questions. And in case you want to, you can, okay, there is one question. Is there any N-glutamine supplements available in India? So I haven't found a good quality one in India yet. But if you have someone traveling from Canada or the US, I can definitely have it shipped to them. How do we determine what's a good probiotic? Very good question. So number one is how stable is it? Do you have to keep it in the fridge, or is it stable? What is the shelf life? Some high quality probiotics, you have to keep it in the fridge. And if you're someone who travels a lot, you have to take out that probiotic, then it loses some of its beneficial effects. That is one, the heat stability. Number two is what is the strength? Like that, like I talked about the colony forming units, so CFU, and usually, a good quality probiotic would be at least 30 billion colony forming units, 30 billion with a B. Then the third thing would be what are the different types of bacteria present in them? So again, there are, I mean, we still haven't reached that point where we can, do a gut microbiome test. And then, we'll tell you, okay, these are the bacteria you don't have enough of. You have less of this and less of that, and we'll just create a probiotic for you. So, bottom line is you need to try out a bunch of them. Then the fourth thing to remember is every 3 to 6 months you need to change the type of probiotics, because the other important thing is if you are on a supplement, you do need to review them to figure out are they really helping you or they're not really doing anything. So if they're not doing anything, then why would you keep having them? So probiotics again are quality matters everywhere. So that is very important. I hope that answers your question about okay. Decrease my levels of pain by over half by doing a lot of energy work and emotional release therapy. Not sure how to proceed with finding out which food I need to be eating. So, yes, energy work, emotional release is fantastic. So, I would suggest that the easiest way to find out about food sensitivities and which are the food that are helping you and which are the ones that are not is by doing an elimination diet. And again, I'm not sure where are you in Calgary? Are you in some other country? Because we have some people from the UK joining us today. So it would depend. And an easy way to do, I'm just briefly explaining it. And this time I'm not going to promise that our email course is ready. It's not ready yet. So basically, what you do, the commonest food, sensitivities are okay. So you've eliminated dairy as it goes straight through me, and you're from Scotland. So, what I would suggest is the easiest way to do an elimination diet is the commonest ones are gluten, dairy, soy, corn. So, these are the four common ones. Then there are processed food. So, what you need to do for 2 weeks, stop eating all these things, and you've already stopped dairy. Now, with dairy, the other important thing to remember is some people are sensitive to maybe cheese, but they're fine with milk, or they're sensitive to milk, but they're fine with yogurt. Some people may be sensitive to cow milk, but they may be fine with goat milk. So then going back to the elimination diet. So first you remove all these food from your diet for about 2 weeks. And then after that, you start slowly reintroducing them one by one. So I usually recommend start with the one you'll miss the most. So let us say it is cheese. So maybe cow milk cheese. So you start with cheese, then track your symptoms for at least 7 to 2 hours. So some of the symptoms may be headache, foggy thinking, joint pain, skin rash, or it could be gut related as well. It could be bloating, diarrhea, pain, anything. If you don't have any symptoms for up to 72 hours, then you introduce the next food, and so on and so on. Sometimes it takes a long time to do that. Another question is kefir a good fermented supplement? Dairy does not bother me. Yeah, so that is where it comes in. Each person is different. Yes, kefir is a good fermented food. It depends on did you if you have felt the benefits, then it works for you. Not everyone feels the benefits, so you need to try out a bunch of different things. A lot of people are not bothered by dairy, but again, some people may be bothered by you have gastroparesis. Could that cause? Yes, it could cause. Now, the other thing is it would also depend. So, gastroparesis is a question about gastroparesis. Gastroparesis is basically the gut does not move as fast as it should. So, it's a little slow moving gut. And the commonest reason quite often for gastroparesis is diabetes, particularly if it's uncontrolled. So, yes, it can cause fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, but it's difficult for me to say just like that because I don't know everything else. So there could be nutritional deficiencies which are because of gastroparesis, or a whole bunch of other stuff which can give you those symptoms. Then of course food sensitivity would definitely make a huge difference. So it's like many different things we need to check before anyone can tell you specifically what it is for you. And many of you are great, are very disciplined at figuring out a lot of this stuff yourself, and hats off to you. I'm not as disciplined as some of you. So yes, it could. And I think that's it. So see you all next month. Next month the topic is irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, and you will receive a recording. Another question is, do you recommend any particular company for good quality supplements, and what are the tests for food sensitivity? So good quality supplements, again, if you are, oh, you're welcome. So good quality supplements, again, the rule that Dr. Iyer and I follow here is, if it's a supplement that I am not going to take myself, I'm not going to recommend it to my patients. So sometimes what happens is, yes, there are some specific companies whose products we sell. So it might seem like because we are selling it, that's the one we recommend. But we recommend those because of the quality. And sometimes many of these companies will not sell online or in a health food store. And most of the time, we do have a checklist on how to check for supplement quality, but you'll never get the answers. So one of the things we recommend you ask, and you can email me and I'll send you the list. One is, where do they get their raw material from? Is it from one vendor versus multiple vendors? Because some of these companies have told us that, when they get this, let us say curcumin, for example, they get from two different vendors, the quality may be completely different, but you may not be able to get that answer from the company you're looking at. Then, have they actually used these supplements to test in particular health conditions? Or is it like with curcumin, it happens very often. Curcumin is good for this, curcumin is good for that. Yes, curcumin is good for these, but have they used your particular brand of curcumin, the company that's talking about? Then the other big thing is, again, do they have a third party testing to check whether it really contains, sorry, what it claims to contain? So I think I had recorded a video some time back. So what they found is, particularly I had taken the example of melatonin. So melatonin, they checked a whole bunch of them, but they found that, let us say the label claimed that it had 3 milligram of melatonin. Many of them didn't even contain 1.5 milligram. So and you cannot make out from just seeing the label. So unless it is tested by a third party, which is again very difficult, most companies will not give you those information. Versus the supplement companies that we use, those we have actually, we have seen those reports and we've personally used them. So yes, there are some companies. And the next question is about food sensitivity testing. And I know the person asking is from India. So the most other tests for food sensitivity, other than the ALCAT testing, so ALCAT, that is a test which has been clinically tried. So they do have some data. Most of the other tests don't have any data. And since you are in India, let me warn you, sometimes they do a food allergy testing because they don't know the difference between food allergy and food sensitivity. Then there is another very rather, and ALCAT testing is, I think, about $400. So we don't, and in India, as far as I know, it's not available. There is another testing some of my patients have done. They send it to Germany, but again, what happens is they come back with a report which contains food which in India people don't even eat. So I usually tell them, don't spend 38,000 rupees on doing a test, which you can find out that same information by doing an elimination diet and save that money for getting better quality food. So I think, thank you very much for being a part of this webinar today, and see you next month. Bye now.